3XE here, just had my coffee, really pumped, posted up Dungeons and Dragons Evolved. What is that? Well, it's just a free compilation I made of essentially enough house rules to warrant it being called a different game. Uh, Honestly, I've just been toying around with a lot of RPG ideas. I wanted to hone my skills at writing them, and because I hope to someday write my own fully fledged unique IP RPG. But this is just some cool rules, and all of this, and as well as the character classes, will be posted on my blog. The link below, and when you go to there, you just click the link on the blog, and then that will lead you to the downloaded off Dropbox if you are interested. Now, of course, everyone's table is different. Your experiences may be different. Different things may apply. So, if you don't like this style of play, no worries. But I like role playing, rules light, in character, cinematic descriptions, giving the DM and the players enough room to breathe and treating them like mature adults that don't need everything spelled out for them. Anyway, I'm sure there's a few normative terms that were thrown in there, but let's go ahead and jump into it. So, well, I'll just start by saying, if you are interested in this, but you don't want to sit through this whole long video, that's totally cool. Just click out now, download it from the link, and read it whenever you want. But I'm just going to be going through the rules, just giving my quick overview, and kind of explaining stuff behind it. So, all right, let's get into it. Dungeons and Dragons Evolved. This picture found it on Google Images, and I thought it was really cool. Just speaks to me in a certain sense of like what fantasy we've kind of lost in that kind of mythical, mysterious sense. But anyway, I just thought it was cool. All right, your role-playing game, typical thing, but I feel like this one is a bit more important than the usual preface for a tabletop RPG book, because it really defines the boundaries of what this game is attempting to do. So I'm going to read it word for word, but I won't do that for every other thing. The ultimate goal of role-playing games is to create fun, dramatic, and memorable stories with friends. Though we sometimes mimic the narrative patterns of other entertainment mediums like books and movies, RPGs are unique in your ability to participate in the crafting of the story, to take on the persona of your character, and to feel that sense of achievement when you overcome the obstacles before you. In a role-playing game, there is a lead storyteller and a number of player storytellers. Each player has a character they control by detailing the character's actions to the lead storyteller, in this case, the Dungeon Master or DM. The player is in charge of bringing across his or her character's goals, beliefs, histories, feelings, skills, flaws, anything else needed to suspend disbelief and make the character feel real. This is what is at the heart of role-playing games. When characters attempt actions for which their degree of success or failure is not a given, we roll dice to determine the result. Most rolls use 20-sided dice or D20. You can pick up a set of dice, local hobby store, or even use one of the many free dice rolling apps available for smartphones. You will also need some paper and pencils to write down details about your character and notes about what has happened thus far in your unique story. So, I really want to stress the lead storyteller and player storytellers. The players are not gamers in a game. They are actors who have the ability to craft the story in an improv type way. All right, so your usual ability scores. The ability scores in DDE, which is Dungeons & Dragons Evolved, I'm just going to call it that for short, are going to play more of a role, the scores themselves, than just their modifiers. That's one of the annoying things I think about 5th edition and all the other editions, seemingly, is that you get these numbers and then you really just use the modifier. Well, in DDE, I'm going to use what I typically do is use what I have been doing in 5th edition, is use the ability score of the person you're trying to do something to, right? As the DC, which in DD I call CR, which I know is kind of confusing, but just because DC difficulty class, that really doesn't make any sense except for to Dungeons and Dragons enthusiast. Everyone else is like, difficulty class? What? So challenge rating. So from here on in, challenge rating is the same as DC in 5th edition. But anyway, so let's say you're trying to trick someone, right? Well, then the CR for that skill test is going to be that character's intelligence score. I think it's the scores range from 1 to 20, so why not, right? All right. The average, I want to stress, the average ability score for human in our world is 10, and within 2 standard deviations, 95% of humanity fall within this yellow range here from 7 to 13. So I don't include in this a way to generate characters. You can do it point by, you can do it roll, you can do it however you want. And there are tons of other, D&D books that have examples, but the way I've done it is I just want to sit down with players, talk about who their character is, and then we'll assign stats according to what makes sense. It's understandable that a hero would have some few extremes, right, in the green or the red, but I would think that 2 would be the absolute maximum, right? And that 2, extreme scores. And if they're really high, they have to bring that across, and they have to give each the credence it deserves in order to really bring the aspect of your character across to prove that, right? So you're not going to have a strength of 20 starting out unless you give me a great reason that you're half ogre and you are 9 feet tall and have giant burly muscles, or you are there's got to be story reasons behind everything. How smart are you? How wise are you? How much common sense do you have? How charismatic are you? And that's going to involve also, like, what does your character look like? As well as how they fare in interpersonal situations. How's their hygiene? If they grew up on a farm in basically the Middle Ages, they are not going to smell very good. They're not going to have the greatest health care. Their constitution might be a little higher just because they've been living, they know how to live rough, but their charisma is certainly going to suffer until they take a bath. All right, experience levels. This is different because I'm pointing out that experience is an out-of-game way to reward players for role-playing. The one thing you'll notice about this game is any character can learn any skill. They just have to declare that they are learning it and spend a certain amount of time learning that skill, which is not shown on camera, essentially. But just like in real life, if you want to go out and learn something that's not within your quote-unquote class, you can. But that being said, certain perks associated with character classes are locked behind different experience point requirements. This is just an easy way to enter a social contract with players that promises that the more they take their characters seriously, the more that they role play with the other players and to the DM, the more potential power their character will be allowed within the game world. So that way we avoid, because you'll find that characters in DDE are very powerful, or can be. We don't give someone, the keys to a 747 airplane right after they finish, or before they've even started taking a flight class, right? Like, we don't want to give someone that character until they've proven in the social contract that they're going to take this seriously and role play it out. So that's what experience is. It's not experience for the character, it is role play experience. The way I was thinking about doing it in my campaign is once you've gotten a character to a certain level, next campaign, or the next character you make, maybe that character dies, it can start at that level or lower. So if you, because you've already proven that you know how to roleplay, right? So if you roleplay really well, you get your character up to level 10, that character dies, you can start your next character at level 10, even if everyone else is level 1. That being said, there isn't that crazy difference of power level. In DDE, a level 1 with a sword is going to be far more dangerous than a level 20 with nothing. Unless that level 20 is, like, trained in fisticuffs or whatever. Anyway. So keep track. This is just a tip for awarding experience points. Essentially, if they do a decent role play, just like a standard job, you're like, okay, you put in the minimum amount of effort, they get XP equal to their next level times 10, so on and so forth. Outstanding, next level times 50. So that's going to mean, because of the things, that this will get you halfway. This will get you a quarter way, and this will get you a tenth to your next level goal. And level 0 are most average folks. I would highly encourage starting characters out at level 0 where they don't declare a class and working one-on-one with that character before the session begins with a prelude session in which you describe your from childhood up to the point where the campaign is going to start, what your character's been doing. So you know what they're good at, you know what they're like, and they're going to earn within that prelude 100 XP if they can roleplay well, and then they'll be at level 1. All right, moving on to skills and proficiencies. So your character can learn anything. Your experience level, like I said, is if you roleplay more and more, you'll be awarded a better and better power to affect the world around you. But essentially, you first start learning something, you become apprentice at it, then you become proficient, then you become advanced. All right? To be, quote-unquote, learning something, we're going to use an abstract term called a learning bank. Okay? To have something in your learning bank, you have to spend at least 5 hours each week in-game studying or practicing the subject. Your character does, right? But they can obviously do more, whatever they want to devote time to. In this way, a character is an apprentice after 15 total hours, proficient after 45 total hours, and advanced after 260 total hours. So if a villager in a village has been a blacksmith his whole life, he's definitely advanced, so he's going to have a +4 to all his blacksmithing stuff. Same thing if a player grew up as a blacksmith's apprentice, they're going to have that when they start out, right? The stats and bonuses and stuff you start out with are based on how your character grew up, not anything else, not built, not point buy. We're not worried about quote-unquote character balance in this game. Now, that being said, you can only have a certain number of items in your learning bank at the same time, essentially saying you can only be learning a certain number of things at the same time. I can attest from college that, kids who take far more than the minimum number of credit hours, they're a lot busier and a lot more stressed than someone who's taking the minimum credit hours, right? And that's because they're trying to learn more things at the same time. So you can only learn a number of things at the same time that's equal to your intelligence modifier minimum of 1. So if you have a 13 intelligence or lower, you can only be quote-unquote learning one thing at a time. Otherwise, your wizards, maybe not wizards, but just your smart characters, they can have the luxury of learning a bunch of different stuff at the same time, have a very eclectic knowledge base. Now, note that if a character is forced to learn something with no outside help from a teacher, text, or other guide, the required number of hours for each benchmark of proficiency is doubled. It's harder to teach yourself something than it is to learn from a teacher, obviously. All right, moving on to skill tests. You pretty much know the drill with skill tests: easy, medium, hard. The CRs are 10, 15, 20. You're rolling 20. Advantage in DDE works by rolling a d6 and adding that to the total. Disadvantage, rolling a d6 and subtracting that from the total. You can, in DDE, have multiple advantages and disadvantages. So if you have two things that are giving you a substantial advantage, you're going to roll 2d6. If you have one advantage thing and one disadvantage, like your leg is wounded, but you have a jump spell going on, then you're going to roll one and add it and roll one and subtract it. Also, I want to clarify, this is something that I feel like a lot of people get wrong. Note that you should roll a skill test for particularly unique and challenging obstacles, or when you are attempting to do something while under pressure. So you do not have to roll skill tests for things your character would absolutely know how to do when the character has an unrestrained amount of time to do the task. If there is a thief who is lock-picking, and this thief knows how to pick locks, and he has an unlimited amount of time to do it, right? Like, they steal this locked chest and they bring it back to their base. He can do it. Because then you're going to be like, well, I keep rolling until I succeed, and it just takes you out of the game. All right. Mortal Kombat, what everyone's been waiting for. Mortal Kombat! Okay. When your character engages in dangerous combats, it becomes very important to detail your character's moment-to-moment actions. This is not in the wargame style of How many actions do I get? Do I get a bonus action, free action, dodge, disengage, whatever? You should, what I mean by moment to moment is you explain in vivid cinematic detail how your character begins, what weapon he or she might use, how she goes about assaulting the enemy, how he or she fends off enemies' attacks. And the DM's going to do the same with the enemy. So the more it's to your benefit, the more you describe. If you say, I want to sweep around to the right and slash at the dude's Achilles heel, well, if you get that dude's Achilles heel is going to be cut, and that dude ain't walking. He's hobbling, maybe, if he can stomach the pain, right? And if his Achilles heel doesn't have armor on it, right? But so your attack is just roll d20, add either dex or your strength, but you only add your strength to the damage. But you also have proficiency bonus if you're proficient with the weapon. Now, defense. There's no armor class. There's only the defense of the target. And the character or monster's defense is either one of these two options. Their constitution ability score plus armor bonus, if they're wearing that, or just their flat dex score for dodging. So, again, the scores are coming in. If an attack meets or exceeds this defense, successful, but by how much harm does it actually inflict? Determined by the damage roll. Roll the damage die. So now damage, this is probably going to be the biggest difference. There is not health points or hit points. There is no HP system. There is a approximate rule that about when you've taken a number of damage points equal to your constitution modifier, that's about the time that you should be near death. But it would be totally based on what has happened. And the way you do that is you look at this chart, you roll your damage dice. So if you got a sword that does a d8 and you're adding a strength of +1, right? Let's say you roll a 4, you get a 5 because +1. Then it's a blade, compromising injuries. Large slashes, moderate piercing. You get to describe that to the DM. The DM can help you. And because of where, like, let's say if you were doing that thing where you attacked the Achilles heel, well, large slash in the Achilles heel, right? So the specific attack, the specific effective attack will vary with the unique circumstances, will vary, how you describe it. Just use your DM, the above chart, and common sense to reason out what will happen. We don't need to turn this into a war game when it's not. This is a role-playing game. This should be cinematic. It should be brutal. In this game, it's brutal. The reason being is because Mortal Kombat should be terrifying and best avoided. But if you're going to, someone who's good at it will be terrifying. If you've got a crossbow pointing at the guy's face, no more of this, oh, well, that only does 1d8 damage and I have 97 hit points. No. This is Mortal Last Combat. Like, this is some serious crap. All right? If you need random locations, you can roll this, add your dex, and then pick any or below. So higher dex, you're going to be easier to hit certain targets. I would only do this. I would do this for enemies, but also I would only do this if, like, there was a disadvantage, like, your attack just barely hit them, or there's some, like, you were using your non-dominant hand, and so you weren't able to be as accurate as you described. Whatever the case may be, when that comes up, this is a chart that can help you. All right. Magic and spell casting. Same schools of magic, just described, because I feel like we don't put enough emphasis on those schools of magic and what they actually mean. You're going to notice there aren't spell slots. There are spell points. I hope that this system is better. I certainly think it's a lot more simple. And when we get to the spells, you'll see how powerful these can be. So you have a maximum spell points equal to your experience level plus the modifier of your spellcasting ability. When you cast a spell, it uses up spell points. You regain X per hour, where X is your ability modifier, minimum of 1. So if you're a wizard, you have an intelligence that gives you a +3. You're going to be regaining 3 per hour, and you're going to have whatever level is, your experience level, +3. An easy spell costs 1 point, medium spell costs 2, and a hard spell costs 3. That is essentially the system. If you ever need to take a spell test, roll a d20, add your spellcasting modifier and a proficiency bonus if you're proficient in that relevant school of magic. All right, we're going to move on. Powers, traits, feats. Powers are available based on your character class. Traits are based on your character's race. Feats are just features, learned abilities with certain prerequisites. Basic stuff. All right, items, equipment. this paragraph is just about, you really need to bring across, well, how does this weigh? How much sound does it make? What is it actually like? Where are you storing this? We want it to make sense. I did a load point system for carrying stuff. It's an approximation, so you can carry a load points equal to your strength ability score. For instance, a bag full of light items uses only half a load point. Or let's say a cumbersome object, but light, uses 1 load point, whereas a cumbersome heavy object uses 5. So that's a lot. If you got a big ass warhammer, two-handed, that's gonna take 5 out of your strength score. Let's say you got a strength of 14, right? That's or 15, we'll say. That's 1/3 of your whole carrying capacity. And when you're very encumbered, you will travel slower. There's no like set rules for it, but it's gonna be obvious. You're gonna get exhausted quicker. You're gonna travel slower. Light armor, medium, heavy armor, these are those bonuses, right? Shield will give you +1. This is just approximate damage dice for different weapons. There isn't a set list with certain weapon abilities. I want people to be able to make up their own weapons and to use them with no penalty, saying, oh, well, that weapon's not in the book, so what is that? We'll just say it's a longsword. And the person's like, well, I've made this really cool, like, I want it to be like a boomerang sword or something, and they're like, well, I don't know what we'll do. And good DMs will work with them, but this just helps that, saying that makeshift, you got your standard armor, swords, etc. Right, this is all approximate language because I want people to be creative with it. I changed the system just to gold pieces. That you can ignore if you don't like that. I just don't like the silver, copper, platinum, gold, that. Magic and healing. All right. Your ability scores can be temporarily reduced when you get injured. You may have disadvantage when you get injured. You need to seek out medical attention quickly. If you're using traditional medicine, this is your stuff, right? If you take a hindering injury, right, you need medical attention within your ability score hours, right? Definitely within the next 12 hours at the least, right? You need to rest afterward a number of 90 days minus your constitution ability score, right? So like this, especially critical injuries. If you get a hand chopped off, you're going to need a long time to rest. Now, of course, this is with traditional medicine, and this will be off camera, but you could also, the benefit to these long swaths of time where you might, in between adventures, be resting, your character can still learn stuff. They can be reading books, they can be practicing with stuff. So it could be a Jaime Lannister type thing where you lose one hand and then, well, what do you do when you're recovering? You learn how to fight with your other hand. If you push yourself, their injury category gets worse. Magical healing circumvents all of that. All right, exhaustion levels, you know how those work. They're a little changed, but whatever. I tried to make the feats as cool as I can. Just came up with sample feats. Note, all of these are sample. The spells are sample. You can and should create your own with your DM. You can and should create your own with your DM. I want to emphasize that. But for example, like Die Hard, right? You have to have a con of 12 or higher and have recovered from 2 or more critical injuries. So, that's like, oh yeah, I lost this eye in this fight. Oh, I lost that ear in the war back when. You got Die Hard, right? As soon as you meet those, you can take it. There's no, like, at this level, you get a feat. You can take as many feats as you want. Work with your DM, though. It should make sense with your character. Obviously, you wouldn't be city-natured and country-natured. Unless there's some special reason. Maybe you're, like, dual personality or something. That could be an interesting character. Anyway, Dirty Fighter, like, prerequisite is just the will to fight dirty. And you just get a +1 to attacks and damage that utilize dirty techniques like throwing sand in the eyes or kicking them in the balls or sweeping the legs, right? Which, again, goes with the combat system to say, be creative with your fighting, right? There's no need, if there's no need to fight, why fight? Why chance it? If you have to fight, why not use every advantage that you have? It really makes the, like, honor-bound, like, paladin type of fighter far more impressive, because they're like, look, I'm going to fight with honor. I'm eschewing these dirty tactics. I want to face things head on, and I know that I could have my hand chopped off. I know that I could die right now, but I believe in my God, and I believe in this. Like, all of this is built toward role-playing your character and to emphasizing this, making every scene count. Every scene should be a scene from a movie. Now, it doesn't mean it has to be a serious scene. It could be a funny scene. It could be whatever, action scene. But every scene should be a scene for a movie. No scene should be, oh, I want to go ahead and repair my longsword. I want to spend 12 gold. I mean, sometimes if you're spending long stretches of time training or traveling, I, as a DM, would ask the player to describe it in a montage. But either way, a montage is from a movie. So, these are, the feats. Hot-headed, I thought this one was fun. You have to prerequisite a wisdom of 10 or less. You have a short temper and are quick to escalate to violence. You get a +1 to attack and damage rolls against people you are in disagreement with or who have offended you. However, each time someone gives you a substantial insult, you must pass a CR15 wisdom test or to restrain yourself from assaulting them. So if you're in the king's court and the king says something and he's looking down on you and calls you a dirty peasant, you got to make that save, or else you're sprinting up to him to punch that guy in the face, and then where you're going to end up. So all of these, I try to be, these are going to make your character unique, right? Sample spells is the last bit here. 5 for each category, including the prayers, intonations, rituals, blessings, auras, hexes that come with the nature and religious classes, which we'll get into. Read these spells. You don't feel like I have to use them again. They're sample, but this will give you a feel as to the level of power that I'm talking about in this game. Let's try to find a good one. Let's see. Most of the religious stuff is specified to followers of your faith. You need to be converting your friends, which is what a cleric or paladin would be doing. If maybe they, I think for one of the miracles, they get one shot. A person can get the benefit of it once from the glory of your god and get healed. But after that, they have to become a member of your faith, or else you consider them turned against your god, and the god won't heal them. They won't hear your prayers to heal that person anymore because that person's experienced it and has then turned their back. Like Babel. Let's see. Visual somatic, a pickled tongue, casting time 2 seconds. Target immediately forgets the languages they know and becomes fluent in the same number of languages they previously hadn't known. This effect lasts for X days, where X is your spell modifier, minimum 1. So that could be really fun, right? Blessings are pretty good. They can just buff your character. Let's see. Conjure Servant, the material component is a pair of gloves. Reason being because the servant takes hold of the gloves, so you see these floating gloves hanging around and doing the tasks. And if other wizards dispel it, they can take control of your servant. Contagion, and I really stress the necromancy. This is some dark stuff, right? And this is for enemies as well as characters. But I mean, this is some. If there is a character doing this, all of these spells and all this stuff are meant to proc other quests, because you're going to have such an effect on the world that it's going to cause ramifications. So if you use a contagion spell, oh god. Alright, so hard necromancy spell. Material component is mammalian carcass, casting time 1 minute. You plague all living things within a radius of X feet with a rotting contagion, where X is your intelligence ability score multiplied by 10. So average guy, intelligence 10, that's going to be 100 feet radius. The diseases affect your stats. -2 to strength, -2 to con, -1 to dex, -5 to charisma because of the rot and the smell. And it can be spread to other living things that fail a constitution test with a CR of your intelligibility score. So this thing could potentially devastate an entire forest of just total rot. This is a quest in and of itself, especially if an NPC uses it and then causes this whole thing. Alright? These are pretty crazy. By the way, you learn these not by leveling up, but by finding scrolls. If you're level 1, you find a scroll or a tome, or it's actually different for each class, but Eat Soul. Alright, this is another dark one. And then we'll move on to the character classes. Hard Necromancy spell. Visual somatic material components. The material component is the victim that is restrained. Casting time 10 minutes. After performing a dark incantation, the victim's soul is made manifest before you to consume, permanently raising by 1 an ability score of yours, determined by the highest ability score of the victim. If they have multiple scores tied for highest, you choose among them randomly. Requires that the victim have a soul, obviously, and after completion, the victim is left as a soulless husk, a zombie. So you could, if you have the spell, you're going to be a necromancer. After you, You know, there's no like, oh, I'm a warlock and I have a dark pact and I'm evil, but pretty much for all intents and purposes, I'm just another wizard and everyone trusts me, right? No, like, you do this shit, people are gonna think you're horrible, and rightly so. If you tie someone down, make manifest their soul, and eat it Temple of Doom style, just to improve yourself. But of course, I mean, like, that's a lot of power. You could just, a necromancer who keeps on eating souls of smart people until he's like godly intelligent. How horrifying is that idea? Anyway, so that's that. Really quick, I'm gonna turn off the camera, switch to the other thing, and then we'll be right back.